Hi, welcome to Entertainment Insider. I'm Gene Triplett, Entertainment Editor for the Oklahoman and News OK. I'm here today with Heather Warlick Moore, Matt Price, and Brandy McDonnell. And I think the first thing we're going to pick up with is the big opening weekend for Watchmen. What does this opening mean for comic book fans, Zack Snyder fans, and fans of comic book movies in general? Heather?
Oh boy, okay. Well, I didn't see the movie. I'm not like a big comic book movie fan. I know that a lot of the critics said it was like really long, and it came in kind of under what they expected on it. But there is a iPod Touch and iPhone game coming out called Watchmen: Justice is Coming. And you can buy that app for less than $1, about the same price as a Sheriff's Citibank. So it might be a good investment.
There you go. Good comparison. You can look at both sides of it. One, $55.7 million is the third highest March opening of all time. So you think, well, that's got to be pretty good, right? It's the sixth highest R-rated opening of all time. That seems pretty good. On the other hand, they had projections of it doing around what 300 did. They were hoping for 70 million. They got 55.7. There was never going to be a sequel to this anyway. So, sequel possibilities doesn't matter. But, it's a $150 million movie. They had to end up giving part of the cut to Fox, part of the cut to Paramount, just because of the complicated journey of this thing. So I think ultimately Warner's is probably a little disappointed in this, especially if you look at, say, something like Wanted, which opened last year. It was developed also off a comic book graphic novel adaptation. It opened to $50 million. It's much less known than Watchmen as far as in the comic book world. And they did tweak it a little more. They took out the superheroic elements, set it, in more of a real world type thing with assassins. It's a few bigger stars than what you had in Watchmen. So does this mean the next adaptation we get is going to be more tweaked along the lines of a Wanted rather than a straight from the page like Watchmen? I think it's possible that somebody could take that spin from the numbers, even though, again, they were good numbers by most stretches, especially with it being a 2:41 running time. It's hard to fit a whole lot of screenings into that. Also, I'll just note real quick, the IMAX screenings did incredibly well, so that could be kind of where you're seeing fanboy numbers really trip it, is that they tend to go to the IMAX screenings like they did for Dark Knight.
Well, I think that it's actually probably a little bit more, I look at it as a little more of a positive sign. This was the biggest opening of the year. It did do some really strong numbers. It's not that far off of the 70 million that 300 opened with a movie that's almost twice as long. I mean, 300 is not even 2 hours. This is almost 3. So you really have cut into the screenings that you have. I mean, if you have an 8 o'clock screening, you can't even have another screening unless somebody's willing to go to the midnight show and spend 3 hours. So it really has cut into the number of screenings. I think it's probably a pretty strong opening for them. The reviews were really good. I think it's probably a good thing for Zack Snyder because the reviews were pretty strong. This was a movie that people had talked about possibly being unfilmable, that he really came out, got pretty decent reviews for. I think the 55 million is not as great as they expected, but I don't know if the expectations were realistic for it, to be honest with you. But I think that you're going to see more of the R-rated comic book adaptations. I wouldn't be surprised if something like Neil Gaiman's Sandman gets kind of on a fast track for development, because people have shown that they will go and see these R-rated comic book movies. And I think that the IMAX numbers are pretty significant. I mean, it was second only to Dark Knight in terms of IMAX numbers. So I really do think that it maybe does a little bit better than maybe it appears on paper because of some of the outlying factors of it, mostly the length.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that 3 different directors, big time directors, tried and failed, to bring this thing to the screen, and then Zack Snyder seems to have succeeded. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure though how most dyed-in-the-wool comic book fans like you, Matt, feel about the film itself. Alan Moore took his name off of it. Do you think that was justified?
Well, Alan Moore just does not want he doesn't want to be involved with Hollywood at this point. So the fact that he took his name off it doesn't necessarily reflect anything on the quality. They make a bad one, they make a good one. He doesn't want his name on it. He doesn't want to be involved. I don't know that kept any of the comic fans away from it. Maybe a few really hardcore ones say, well, I'm not going to see it because Alan Moore isn't. But I think for the most part, I think it actually did well with the fans. I think probably where it has trouble is you've got a 3-hour movie with a ton of violence and a naked blue man. And that may not play to, the middle of the road customers quite as much.
Okay. Well, Brandy, you got a concert to go to tonight up in Tulsa. New Kids on the Block. They're back together. Mm-hmm. They're playing the BOK Center tonight. What do you guys think are some of the best and worst band reunions of all time? Heather?
Okay, well, I think you and I are on the same page with this one. In Excess. I thought it was pretty funny how they did the rock star show, to find their new lead singer, and then some of the drama that's going on right now with the band is that the new singer J.D. Fortune basically he fired himself from the band, is the way it seems. He said he was fired with a handshake and a "we'll see you later, kid" type of thing in Hong Kong, and then but the manager of the band's like, well, we don't know what he's talking about. We were just getting ready to call him for another gig. And so now J.D. Fortune apparently says that he's living out of his car, and he admitted to a big cocaine habit, which may have led to him getting fired. So there's all kinds of drama going on right now with that whole deal.
J.D. loss of fortune.
Yeah, J.D. misfortune.
One that I liked, actually, I just watched the DVD of this Buenos Aires concert last night, was the Police reunion from last year. I watched him on the Grammys, and I thought, it's possible Sting is not hitting all the notes like he used to. He's a little bit older guy, but watching this Buenos Aires concert, they really had their old style back together, so that was one that I enjoyed. As far as ones I don't like, anytime you get one guy that played the keyboard on one tour and it's him and a bunch of other guys, that to me is not so much that, I don't really like the reunions that are not really any of the original people, or very few of them. So,
Brandy?
Well, the one that I'm really enjoying and really hopeful that we'll see more of is the Led Zeppelin reunion with John Bonham's son on drums. I think that's a great reunion. The ones that I don't like, I have to agree with you. I hate things like Creedence Clearwater Revisited. I hate things like the Doors of the 21st Century back in 2002, where you're going to bring back the Doors without Jim Morrison. I mean, it's sort of like bringing back NXS. I mean, it doesn't quite work when your front man, who's particularly one who's such a personality, so charismatic, and your primary songwriter decides to leave the band, and then you try and go on without him. I'm never going to go with Paul Rodgers as the lead singer of Queen. I don't care how you punctuate it. And I think as far as sort of the boy bands and the pop bands and things like that, I mean, to each his own, adolescent pop music hang up. Who am I to throw stones as a former New Kids on the Block fan? But I think that there's sort of a necessary time period that has to pass. I mean, like the Backstreet Boys coming back after 3 years, that's really not much of a reunion. You don't get a whole lot of nostalgia in 3 years, do you? I mean, and the Spice Girls after like 6 years, particularly if you've got like 1 or 2 songs that you're trying to bank into nostalgia. I don't think 6 years is probably enough time to really get too nostalgic about the Spice Girls. It seemed like they never left. So those really are some of my favorite reunions.
That whole New Kids on the Block thing reminds me of that Man Band show where they got all these old former, boy band stars like Brian Abrams from Oklahoma and threw them together and made a man band. It's kind of the same deal.
Yeah. I mean, at least 15 years have passed. I mean, so, and at least they have new music and a new album, no matter what you might think of their new music or their old music. At least there's been some time passed and they're making music and their fans seem happy, but I can't imagine that the Spice Girls or that there was much there to build on, particularly after only 6 years.
Yeah. Well, I have to agree with Heather. I think NXS is one of the worst mistakes in the history of band reunions. And they go on this reality show, which was all. I think I watched maybe one episode.
Yeah.
And they end up with an Elvis impersonator from Canada, J.D. Fortune. And then look where they are now. So
doesn't work out.
Well, they are without a front man now, so if anybody's looking for a new band.
Yeah.
Apparently they'll take anybody.
I guess it'll be season 2 of Rockstar. I don't know. My favorite reunion of all time is Cream, because here was the original supergroup, and they got back together in 2005. I was lucky enough to witness that at the Madison Square Garden in New York. They still are worthy of that label, supergroup. Jack Bruce was still nimble as ever, could make the bass guitar into a lead instrument, and Ginger Baker with his jazz-influenced complex drumming, and both of those guys lit a much-needed fire under Eric Clapton, because I think Eric Clapton's been dogging it since he left Cream and Blind Faith and Derek and the Dominoes behind. He's just I just haven't.
He does better with a band behind him. He just does.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he always has, and that's a great one. I think that's a great one, because they never did get along very well. So it was great that they could sort of put aside everything for a little bit, so they could
fences for at least a year anyway.
Right.
They had 7 performances. I think 4 of them in London and 3 in New York. But it was worth the trip up there to see it. Movies. What's your movies again? What's your reaction to last week's announcement that a major motion picture starring Kate Hudson, Jessica Alba, and Casey Affleck is going to be filmed in Oklahoma?
Well, I just remember when the announcement broke in the office, Mr. Matt and George Lang were running around like a couple of girls, all excited about who's going to be in town. Woohoo. I think it's cool. I mean, I'm surprised that there are not more movies that film in Oklahoma. I was working at the Capitol when the Oklahoma Film Enhancement Rebate kicked in when that was passed by Congress, and you know, it's a great incentive to come film in Oklahoma. You can get up to 17% of your filming costs, you know, rebated to you. You have to spend at least $300,000 in the state, and you have to employ like 50% or more below the line crew of Oklahomans. So, you know, it's pretty cool. You can also qualify for state and local tax breaks. So, you know, I'm surprised there's not more of it, but it's exciting, and I know that you guys are really excited.
Yeah, it's one of the, it sounds like really the list of biggest names that we've had here, maybe since Twister, right? As far as
I think these are bigger names than Twister, really.
And yes, George and I were very excited that Jessica Alba was going to be in the state. So, yeah, I think it's really a good thing for the state. Let's hope it does well and goes well for them so that more people will look at doing that in the future.
Well, I think it's a great thing. I mean, how could you be anything but excited, and if you're a movie fan here in Oklahoma, to see that group of people coming here. I also think it's great that it's, particularly since it's based on the work of an Oklahoma author, an Oklahoma-born author, that it's great that it's filming here in the state. I think it's going to be huge for the state and for the towns that it's filming in specifically, and I'm hoping that maybe it will light a fire under the career of some of these people, because Jessica Alba and Kate Hudson not exactly been doing, you know, sort of their best work lately, and I think Casey Affleck right now is better known for being the documentarian for Joaquin Phoenix than he is for anything he's been in lately. So hopefully it'll be good for their career as well.
Well, we'll see. The Killer Inside Me is the name of the film, and like Brandy said, it's based on a pulp novel by Jim Thompson, who was born in Anadarko and who also authored The Getaway and The Grifters. Both of those novels were made into hit movies. So if you know, Thompson-based film track records are any indication, this might be a successful film. And if it is, then maybe it will entice more major productions to come to Oklahoma. Because, like Matt mentioned, or somebody mentioned, this is the biggest film, honest to goodness, major motion picture to come to Oklahoma since 1996, when Twister shot here. Everything else has been, you know, small potatoes, independent films that really never went anywhere.
Or day in and day out, like in Elizabethtown.
Elizabethtown was,
right.
they were here for
But they were here for a day.
So that didn't count. 85% of the principal photography is going to be here in Oklahoma for The Killer Inside Me. So that's a good deal. It bodes well for the movie industry in Oklahoma.
Are they still casting for extras for that?
I don't know if there's going to be any more casting or not. They had a casting call in Guthrie on Saturday and Cordell on Sunday. Those are two of the towns where they're going to be filming. And I think about 750 people showed up for the one in Guthrie. I was kind of surprised that there weren't more.
Yeah.
I thought there'd be a line around the block, but there wasn't.
You guys, I was an extra stand-in and photo double in Twister. So
were you really?
Yeah, I have that whole experience, and it was just a blast. So I know it's going to be a lot of fun for the people that are doing it this time.
Well, you should have gone up for the casting call.
Freeze frame your DVD. Anyone in particular?
Yeah. They actually cut Jamie Gertz's haircut to look like mine, because her hair was a lot longer and all this stuff. Some pretty funny stories from that deal. So.
Hey, we got a movie star here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for Entertainment Insider this week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Let's see it.